Hey everyone, if this is your first talk with us, then welcome to the Product Marketing Festival. And for those of you that have already been tuning in, welcome back. We hope you will or have been enjoying what's going on, and we just want to take the opportunity to say thanks to all the sponsors and partners. And if you're not already signed up, don't forget to check out the Slack channel for lots more product marketing resources and discussion. Enjoy the talk.
Hello and welcome to my talk. I'm Kevin Zentmeyer and I'm here to talk about why you should own pricing even if you know nothing about pricing. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Ibotta, and you can find some more things from me at kevinzentmeyer.com. So a little bit about me. I lead product marketing at Ibotta. I've been in product marketing at 5 different companies at this point, and with varying degrees of pricing ownership. It's always different at every company. I have a BA in economics and an MBA in marketing and analytics, but what I'll show you in a little bit will show you that those things don't really matter very much. You don't actually need them to be able to do this. And I also did finance before sort of seeing the light of product marketing and realizing that that was going to be a lot more fun in my career than crunching numbers and valuing assets. So never looking back there. So goals for this talk are to demystify pricing, because I think there's a lot that people sort of get overwhelmed with and think is a bit too technical for them, and I'll show you that it's not. I'm going to show you where the banana peels are. So for any Mario Kart fans, there's one for you. And I want to give you a playbook so that you can sort of take this on and have a method, at least one of them, to sort of pursue pricing and owning that space within your company. So more specifically, the agenda is going through stakeholder alignment, because that is the most important thing. That's where you should start. Talk about how to make pricing changes, customer insight channels so that you know what you're doing, accelerate revenue using pricing, when to make pricing changes, making the right change, and discounting. So stakeholder alignment, that's the hard part. We're going to sort of eat the frog and start with the hardest part here, and then take it from there. The reason why it's so important and why you have to start here is without alignment, you will make no progress in making pricing changes. They will get rejected by sales. They'll continue selling or using their old sheet and get approval for it. Finance will throw up on whatever you've come up with. You won't get anything done if you don't start here. So who owns pricing? It's a multiple choice question. Is it finance, sales, product, marketing, the executive team? All the above. All the above, so really none of the above. Or seriously, nobody does. It just kind of happened and no one's really aware of what's going on. I've seen a mixture of all of these. So it, again, varies from company to company. Frequently what I see is that it's sort of a shared responsibility, so no one really does anything about it. And so opportunities that exist in pricing go sort of unexploited. And it's a lever that's left untouched, which is a mistake, because it's extremely important for revenue growth, which as product marketers at tech companies, that's obviously extremely important. So that's not obviously what you want to do. So what matters to do pricing right? A lot of things. So first, again, alignment. Customer insights, so that you're making these changes based on something. There's sort of a bag of tricks in pricing. There's different ways to do it. They're much less important than knowing why you're doing things. And sort of once you have the customer insights and have a framework of understanding of what you're trying to achieve, the bag of tricks kind of is an easy afterthought. Financial modeling, at the very least, you need to understand the impact that making various changes will have on the finances of your company. Otherwise, you don't really know how to sort of value or gauge the upside and the downsides. And then lastly, business analysis. There's always, in most companies, you're using Salesforce and all of your customer data is within that platform. And so being able to access that and analyze it is very important. But also business intelligence is just as important, because you need to understand customer metrics. So if you're pricing based on usage, you need to know where the usage of those customers is versus where the actual caps are. those types of things. So BI or BA, depending on how you frame it in your company, is very important as well. But here's the secret. If you focus on the leadership needs, you can basically outsource the rest. So you don't actually need to have all of these things yourself, which is great because very few people do. It's very hard to have all those things in one person, but you don't need to, again, because you're going to do it via, a team or a committee, and that's what's going to enable you to get stuff done. Just like in the rest of your working life as a product marketer, you lean on others throughout the organization. In general, we don't own things, we influence things. That's also true in pricing, and that's how you should think about it. So who should own pricing? Obviously, I have an opinion here, but finance, while this is actually where it sits in many companies, I think it's actually the worst fit. So finance people have all the technical skills. However, they don't interact with the customers. And they don't actually interact with the people who are interacting with the customers that much. And so they tend to operate in a vacuum and sort of see the gives and takes on the P&L and how it affects the finances, but they don't really think about it in terms of how it affects the customers. And if you don't think about it in a customer first way, you're going to end up making a whole lot of mistakes that look great in an Excel document, but don't actually deliver the results that you want to see. Sales frequently also owns pricing. They're great from an insights perspective in that they have the most direct customer access of any of the departments, but they also have a lot of vested interest in this because that pricing determines their ability to close deals and in how they see it. And so just because they're so directly tied to the commission structure, you have a little bit of a fox in the hen house effect if you're letting sales just run pricing in a vacuum, as they tend to when they control it. Product. So from a customer insights perspective, they're great. They're also great at getting alignment, which is extremely important to making any kind of pricing change effective and making sure that all the voices are sort of in the room and heard. However, it doesn't really align with their primary objective. So as a product manager, your key goal is really building the right product. And getting that right is so hard just by itself that adding pricing and revenue growth on top of that is a lot to ask. And so lastly, marketing. Product marketers are customer focused, so that's a great start. PMMs are great at getting alignment. We do that all day, every day. And the marketing goal is always revenue growth. So alignment for not only ability to get alignment across the org, but also the personal alignment of the goals of the marketer are there. And so to me, product marketing, and granted I'm biased, but product marketing is the best fit for where pricing should be. So that doesn't mean that product marketing should operate in a vacuum and just do it by themselves. That the best way, in my view, is to start a pricing committee. So what is a pricing committee? Well, a pricing committee gives you a couple things. It's a vehicle to both drive alignment and to give you outsourcing. Because again, we go back to that list before. That's too many things to ask of one person. It's unrealistic. And so this really gives you your vehicle to bring in those additional skills that you may lack or not be quite as strong in, to be able to fill that out. And you do it by assembling this dream team, so to speak. So again, the 5 sort of things that you need alignment, which as a product marketer, you should be quite good at. For customer insights, you're a good start, but you should also add in sales. So sales should be a part of this pricing committee. The pricing bag of tricks, to be honest, just outsource that to the internet, right? Like all of the models exist out there, and you can read up on them when you figure out what it is that you want to accomplish in a given situation. Similar to how software engineers typically are sort of doing research on what are the ways for them to accomplish their technical goal, and we'll sort of look on GitHub or those types of things. You can do the same thing as a pricing leader, and you don't need to have the entire bag of tricks in your head. Don't worry about that. And then for financial modeling, finance should already be a part of this pricing committee because their alignment is going to be extremely important. And to be honest, no matter how good at finance you are as a product marketer, you're not going to be as good at it as a financial analyst who does it all day, every day. And so adding them to the team is going to be helpful. And then business analysis. So add analytics, right? Add someone from the analytics team to help you there, to help dig through Salesforce and BI. Even though you may and probably should have a Salesforce license, that doesn't mean that you're going to be as quick to pull data and be able to analyze it as a BA is going to be. So you need to add them to the team. Again, not just to add those skills, but also for alignment so that their boss gets on board with the changes that you're looking to make, because they know that analytics has had a hand in it and has been part of the decision-making process. And that's going to help you as you bring things to the executive level. So what are the components of a pricing committee? Well, there's the team. So you've got to define that membership, who's in the team. A RASCI is quite useful. I normally hate RACIs or RASCIs, but to be honest, in a pricing committee, they're actually very helpful. It's the only time that I've ever really used one to any effect, as opposed to more so being an annoyance. So I recommend using one of those in this situation. You need a time commitment from everyone on the team. So everyone needs to dedicate a certain slice of their time to be able to make this effective, because if finance is doing a great job of analyzing the opportunities that come up through the pricing committee, but analytics isn't pulling the appropriate data that you need, you're going to stumble and you're not going to be able to make progress. So all different parts of the committee who are a part of it need to commit a certain amount of time. Otherwise, you won't make progress. Team meeting cadence is very important. You need to establish that up front. It'll be a forcing function for people to be getting their work done week to week. And we'll sort of set a schedule for you to set milestones and goals along the way to, again, make that progress. You need a roadmap. So just like you have a product roadmap, you need a pricing roadmap. And this pricing roadmap really serves to accomplish the same kinds of goals that you have with a product roadmap, and that you're sort of mapping out your priorities, but then also what are the sort of dependencies and other teams that are needed, and when are the appropriate times to make things happen. And that roadmap will really assist you in sort of laying that out and communicating that to your cross-functional stakeholders, exactly like our product roadmap. So you should be very familiar with that concept, so it should be pretty easy for you guys. You also need principles. What do I mean by that? I mean that really you need to define what is it that is the goal of the pricing committee, and sort of what are you optimizing for? If you're familiar with OKRs are a good kind of framework or a way to think about this. So within the principles, you need to decide on what your metrics are. Like what goal do you seek? Let's say you want to optimize revenue growth, but is it revenue growth within the next 6-month time period? Is it long-term revenue growth, and you're looking at 2 to 3 year time windows? Are you looking at cash in the door, because your burn rate is sort of eating up your cash, and you really need to shift the way that you collect, and sort of pulling people on upfront payments is more important. So you really need to decide what are the goals that you're trying to seek. And then also, similar to an OKR structure with health metrics, you have to decide, what do I want to do no harm to, or what am I also comfortable doing a little bit of harm to at the expense? What am I comfortable with doing a little bit of damage to, as long as I'm optimizing for X? So for example, any change that you make is going to take time and cost the sales team some downtime in training. So are you looking to do no harm to that sales team, or are you looking to minimize harm in terms of productivity there? So you've got to kind of lay out what it is that you're sort of seeking, and what are you willing to hurt? Because there will always be trade-offs as you go through this process. You also need an executive mandate. Otherwise, people are going to say, like, what the heck is this pricing committee? What do you mean you decided that you were doing this thing? Who gave you the right to do that? Get out of here. So to get that executive mandate, you need to present the committee to the executive team. And what do they want to know? They want to know that there's going to be a good ROI on the time of the team. Those slices of time that the constituents of the committee have committed. So finance, you've got a business analyst and a financial analyst who are committing a third of their time to this project. You need to lay that out and show that you're going to get a good return in terms of revenue back on the time that they're going to have to invest in OpEx. So also from a product service scope, so like let's say you're a software as a service company. If you're also selling professional services, are services part of the scope, or are you really just looking at software? You have to decide what's in and what's out. Discounting scope. are you setting just list price, or are you also setting discounting rules? I would suggest that you do both, because otherwise, if you don't really control discounting within the committee, you don't really control price, because the real price is the effective price or the net price post discount. Once the sales team gets their hands on it and they actually say, well, I'm selling it for this, that's the price that matters. And so if you just control list price, but you don't do anything in terms of discounting, then the salesperson really wholly owns sales, or excuse me, owns pricing. And they're going to be doing it and optimizing it around their individual book of business. And as an individual sales rep, without the kind of resources that you're bringing to bear with finance and business analytics and customer insights and so forth. So I would suggest that you don't want that. So you want agreement on principles from that exec committee, very important. Because once they've agreed on these are the principles that we're comfortable with you running by, then when you bring the recommendations to them of, we want to change this, we want to do that, because it's already within the framework of the principles, you should have pre-agreement for basically everything that you're going to recommend. And so it gets much easier at that point. And you're also going to want an executive check-in cadence. Is it quarterly, every 6 weeks? You just need to decide what that looks like, both as a forcing function for the team, but also so that they know that you're making progress on it, and the executive mandate they give you isn't given in vain. They know that things are happening. So how do you actually make pricing changes? Super important. Here's a quote from Profitwell, a company that's in the space that I really liked. So, pricing is a process that utilizes data to eliminate as much doubt as possible for key stakeholders to make a profit maximizing decision. There is no silver bullet, but with data, you'll have a nice barrel full of lead. Perfect. Pricing is a process. It is an ongoing thing. Pricing never gets perfected. It is always evolving. As your business evolves, as your product evolves, as your customer base evolves, pricing will always be changing, which is why you're going to need to have dedicated personnel that are focusing on it to always be getting it right. What is that process? So this is the process that I favor. So it's very similar to product, again, probably because I'm a product marketer, but start with the discovery process, then analyze what you've discovered, make a recommendation to the executive committee, you'll get a decision, and then you start implementing it. Pretty simple. So discovery work, how do you do discovery on pricing? Well, a good place to start is just to ask for problems. Seriously walk around the company, talk to various departments and ask for them, what problems does pricing cause? What's wrong with pricing? And you'll get a lot of responses. Generally, people hate pricing. So you'll get a lot of feedback. So that's a great place to start. One thing you need to keep in mind is you need to listen for bias, though, because typically, not everybody, but typically you'll hear from sales, the price is too high, it's getting in the way of me being able to do this deal, blah, blah, blah. Or from customer support, this thing is too complicated, I always get these questions about it, blah, blah, blah. Your bias is going to change based on the department, so you just need to factor that into the feedback that you receive from them. You also should be finding opportunities yourself, so self-source. So a great way to sort of dig deeper once you've sort of sourced what sounds like a problem is to do the 5 whys, which is, if you haven't heard of it before, it's essentially the concept that if I ask why 5 times to progressively dig deeper into the problem, eventually I'll get to the actual root problem and figure out the thing that I should really fix so the problem doesn't come back. That's often the case in pricing, because it may not be, let's say, oh, the cap is actually too high. Maybe that's actually the wrong metric, or maybe we're measuring the metric wrong. It could be a litany of different things. You really need to dig into it to get to the root of the problem there. You should also be looking at competitors. Competitors are a great place to benchmark and find ideas of how you should be pricing, whether it's a different model or something that your customer or prospects prefer more. That's a good place to look. Also, sort of what if analysis. What if we did freemium? What if we did something completely different than we do now? What if we increased our price by 10x? Just start there and then see where you end up. And then you need to prioritize all those different sets to dig deeper into analysis, because discovery is relatively easy. It's quick. Analysis is tough. So once you've decided which areas to focus on, this analysis part takes way more time. So you want to prioritize before you get there. Otherwise, you'll just spend way too much in analysis and won't ever get to the recommendation, decision, and implementation where the actual value is created for the company. So you really got to winnow that that list down before you get to analysis. So once you've figured out what problems are, now it's actually a good time to research that bag of tricks. Go consult the internet. Go consult somebody else who does pricing, and figure out what are some solutions that could help you with the problems that you've uncovered and sized and have decided are worth pursuing. You'll want to test multiple options. What does that mean? Doesn't mean necessarily you want to test them in the marketplace, but more so that you want to scenario plan different ones. So feed them to the business analytics or finance person who's helping you, and feed them to sales, and then just see what they come back with. What impacts would this have on customers? How do you think they would feel about it? What would this do to the P&L if we did this and this? And then you'll figure out whether this is a good idea fairly quickly. You want feedback from sales, and then you're going to do a customer impact analysis. What does that mean? It's more than just saying we're going to make $10 million if we make this change. It's going to impact 250 customers, and they're in this tier of our customer base. And that tier of our customer base has this average NPS score. And we feel good about putting that additional stress on them of raising their price, or we don't. Really think about it from a micro point of view, a microeconomic point of view. Put yourself in their shoes, which as a product marketer, you're fully capable of doing, right? So put yourself in their shoes and figure out, is this going to be worth it to them? And how are they going to perceive this impact? And is sort of the juice going to be worth the squeeze in this scenario? Next, you're going to want to make that recommendation. That recommendation is going to go to the executive team, because once you've done the analysis, you've already gotten the feedback from everyone sort of at your level to figure out whether this is actually a good idea. You know it's a good idea once you've gone to recommendation. So once you take it to the exec committee, you're going to want to de-jargon it. It's totally fine if you want to blow people away with your fancy terminology that you found on the internet for pricing methodologies. That's totally fine. I've done it. But you want to de-jargon it just to make sure they fully understand it, because otherwise questions will come up later. And you don't want to catch questions after the fact. You want to kind of nip those in the bud at that point. You're going to balance the stakeholder impacts, and you're going to show how you did that. To say, look, this is going to have an impact on we're going to have to take the sales team off the floor, train them for 2 hours so they understand this thing. We're going to have to train the customer support team so that they understand how to deal with the questions. We built an FAQ for them. You're going to want to show that you've done your homework of balancing the stakeholder impacts, and that this is a reasonable approach given all the sort of variables in play. And then also you're going to declare what the timing looks like. So you're going to say, I want to roll this out at the beginning of Q1. We're going to do it on this date. The pricing will go into effect for customers who we haven't started talking about pricing with, so deals that are in the discovery phase here. And then for customers who've already had a price quoted, that quote is still good for another month. So you want to lay out what that timing looks like and nail that down. And then once the executive team sort of ratifies that and decides that, gives you that mandate and says, yes, this is what we're doing, then you're able to bring that to the sales team and other departments that are impacted and tell them that that's the result. And then you have that mandate to be able to say, it is happening here. I understand if that causes some stress in your department, but this is when it's happening because this is when the CFO wanted it, right? So that gives you a lot more sort of air cover and gives you that point in time to say, it's happening at this point, which is very helpful. Otherwise, these things are just kind of, will get pushed out and slid. So then the implementation, so there's a lot of different factors. It depends on your company, but again, you're going to need to document the heck out of this thing. When you make a change, you're going to need FAQs for various departments. You're going to need to document your rationale, which your rationale should always go into your training, because salespeople want to understand why you made this change, both because they need to get comfortable with it and accept it because this affects them in a pretty major way, but also because they're going to have to then explain this to customers. So you're going to have to really drill it into them in the way that they're going to, it's going to sort of hit home, and they're going to be able to explain it in their own words after the fact, after they're out of the training. So very, very important that you get that training right and that the rationale is really, really strong, strongly communicated. Reporting, commissions, your ERP system or your subscription manager, like Zuora, is going to need to be updated. And then you're going to have both your internal comms to tell people this is coming and your customer comms to sort of do the same thing. all needs to be sort of addressed and timelined out. And this is where some project management help, if you can get it, is always helpful. So the executive deck, real quick, it's basically a cycle. So you show your results from the prior changes you made. You lay out your pricing roadmap and say, this is what's coming up. And then you say, these are the opportunities that were at the top of my roadmap. And so therefore we addressed them and came up with these solutions. Here are my recommendations to fix those things. There are customer insights baked into that to be able to say, I feel confident, I've de-risked this change and I know that this is going to work because we talked to these customers. We did this survey. You have all of this customer insight to be able to give you confidence in this change, which will then give confidence to the executive team and giving you that mandate to make all those changes. And then you're going to lay out that implementation timeline so that, the head of sales, the head of customer support, et cetera, knows how this is going to impact their team and is sort of gets comfortable with it at the executive level. How to use pricing as a strategic revenue accelerator. So real quick, very basic formulas. Anyone can do this math, but volume times price equals revenue, right? How many things do you sell at what price? That's how much money you make. That's the easy one. The same is true for growth, right? But people often forget about it. People forget about pricing growth. They mainly focus on volume growth, which is a mistake because typically if you're in a high growth tech company, revenue growth matters kind of more than anything. And you're sort of leaving one lever maybe on the table or maybe just under-examined. And then the slightly more complex one is price growth or your net revenue retention ratio. That makes or breaks your LTV to CAC. What is LTV to CAC? It is your lifetime value, how much they pay you over the lifetime of being a customer, divided by your customer acquisition cost. Basically, any venture capital firm or institutional investor will value your company based on this formula of LTV to CAC. And the major thing that will determine it is when I land a customer, am I able to charge them more money next year than the year that they joined? Am I able to find ways to engage them and get them to spend more money with me and have pricing levers built into the product to be able to capture that increased engagement via pricing? That's super important, and that's basically what will drive that ratio more than anything other than the quality of your product, which is much harder, obviously. So here's a pricing impact example that I love. So here's Dropbox. So Dropbox versus Google. You could say Microsoft, you could pick another product, but I'm doing Dropbox versus Google. So Dropbox, my apologies if anyone on this presentation works for Dropbox or Google, but Dropbox by any right should be just destroyed by Google. Google has a much better product. They have so many advantages, but they don't. And I would say that it's really comes down to their pricing strategy. And I'll show you what I mean. So first, they have a clear freemium model, which means it's free until you hit certain tiers of usage, and then they start charging you. They have really low data caps, which granted reduces the quality of the product because they're saying, hey, you only get 2 gigabytes of data free. Past that, you got to pay us every month. So that does lessen the value of the product. However, it does increase the likelihood of a user to use the referral program to get more data added to their caps. Instead of 2 gigabytes, they get 4, 6, 8, 10, et cetera, to really let them keep using the product in the engaged way that they've been doing. So you compare that with Google. Google has a freemium model as well, but they have confusing metrics. It's if you dig into it, it's not easy to see at the face value how it actually works as a Google consumer. And even as someone who works in pricing, it took me several pages to finally break down exactly how it works because they don't really make it easy to follow. They have higher data caps, which increases the value of the product because they're saying, I'm not going to give you 2 gigabytes of data. I'm giving you a lot more than that. And they have superior product features. They suited it with Google Docs, just like Microsoft Suite includes in the Office suite, Word and Excel, et cetera, with their cloud storage product. It's a superior brand. Google is one of the most valuable brands in the world, and they have 2 billion MAUs. If you have 2 billion users, you should be able to cross over everyone into your free product, right? But they don't. The net result is several years into this battle between these two companies, these were their results from the last quarterly report. So 2.1% quarter over quarter user growth and 1.5% quarter over quarter revenue growth per user, which is back to what I said before in terms of it being super, super important to squeeze more money out of the customers who you already have. So that the combination of those two numbers means an annualized revenue growth of 15.2% per year, which is pretty good. That's great. Ends up with them getting a 5.6 multiple of their sales. That's their valuation of the company, and they have a $9.3 billion market cap. A big company. Basically, they're doing just fine. And it really comes down to, in my opinion, their pricing strategy, because they don't have a ton of other stuff going for them compared to the massive behemoth that is Google. So that is kind of an example of why it's so important to get this right, because it can really be a huge strategic advantage to you. So real quick, we're going to talk through the different ways that people tend to approach it. So it's usually one of these three. Competitor-based pricing, where I'm really looking at my competitor. I'm Dropbox. I'm looking at Google, and I'm saying, this is what you charge for 100 gigabytes of storage. I'm going to charge a little more, a little less, the same, but I'm basing it on what you're charging. Cost plus pricing is, I'm again Dropbox. It costs me $1 to host 100 gigabytes of storage, so I'm going to charge $2 because I want to charge a 100% markup on my price. That's cost plus. Value-based pricing is really the value to a consumer of 100 gigabytes of storage when I get dig into their use cases and I understand how they use it is really $2 a month, so that's what I charge them. So those are the different models, but they're really incomplete. So when you read about these models, whether it's in business school or you read about it on the internet, wherever you go, or a presentation like mine, the problem is that they're always looked at generally in isolation and in comparison to each other when really they're complementary. So really the way that you should look at it, in my opinion, is a multi-angle analysis. So you should have competitive analysis. You should look at how you stack up versus your competitors in terms of your pricing. You look at your internal knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge inside your company. There's a lot of knowledge inside of your data, your NPS surveys, et cetera. And then you should do some third-party studies. So I just listed three of the big companies that do it: Profitwell, CXL, and MMR, but there are a lot of other ones. Recommend doing something like that, because then you really have an internal view, an external market view within your market, and then you also have a third leg of the stool that makes this much more effective and gives you sort of some of the specificity around questions that you want answered that you can get done in a study that you can't get done if you can't actually ask prospects and customers questions that like a salesperson that works for your company is never going to let you do, right? Or they're never going to give you an honest answer to. Willingness to pay is not something that you should ever really talk about with your actual customers. So these are the only pricing questions that really matter. They're kind of hard to answer, but they're the only ones that really matter. So what are my competitors' prices? You sometimes have to do a little digging if they're not public, but you need to get your hands on your competitors' pricing. So that's competitor-based pricing. That was one of the models that we saw earlier. And then, is my product better or worse than yours? That's, again, competitor-based, because you're saying, they're here. Do I want to be here, or do I want to be a little higher? How much is that difference worth, right? Which one is another thing competitor-based pricing doesn't really ever get into, which is the value-based component. So do I want to be twice as expensive, half it? Once I've decided that my product is better than yours, do I want to be 10% higher or 20% higher? You have to figure out a way to score that and to size it. And value-based pricing method is very effective at doing that. Can I make money at this price? Because if you can't, you shouldn't be in that business at all. And at what volume? So, once I hit, because you can also say, well, at a certain scale, I will then finally make money. And that's fine. So cost plus is a good method to figure out what's my floor or what's my tolerance in a market. And especially for new products is incredibly helpful, because again, it can be the judge of whether you want to even get into that space. Because again, if I'm looking at businesses to get into, document storage is probably not one of them, because if you did that cost plus analysis with the scale of the people who are operating it, you're probably not going to make money. So good to use that. Then the fifth question is this simpler or more complicated than my current pricing? So this is one that is, as far as I can tell, is mine. So complexity has costs to it. They're soft costs, but they're very real. And so you should take a hard look at, am I making things more complicated or simpler? Because not only is there cost in terms of the implementation of that, but also adding complexity is just going to make your next change that much harder. So if you're the one running pricing, be a little selfish. Don't make your job that much harder in the future by making it more complicated. Keep simplicity will not only save on cost, but it'll also save you headaches. And if you're a salesperson, make your job that much easier. So the net result looks something like this as a general visual. So there's your better competitor's price. So who's doing it better than you in your market? Hopefully no one, but let's say there is. And then who's doing it worse than you? And then you're sort of bracketing and saying like, well, I know that I should be more expensive than these guys, but less expensive than these guys. You sort of bracket yourself in. And then there's the value-based advantage of like, well, how much more is my product worth than the one who's not quite as good as I am? And then how much of a price advantage would I need for somebody to switch to me? Because they have a better product, but at some point I'm willing to deal with the lack of features that your product has to be able to save some money, right? And that could also be based on personas and budget basing. But let's say generally that's really how you want to do it is really space it between your competitors and figure out what should that premium and what should that discount be. So when to make pricing changes. All right. So external. What I really mean by external is not by the pricing committee, right? If it's external to the pricing committee. So market driven would be like your competitor comes out with a new feature and doesn't raise their price. They're just better now. Happens all the time, right? As a SaaS company, we roll out features nonstop. Or competitors change their price, particularly if one of your higher end competitors reduces their price and gets more competitive with you on the low end. That's tough. Or a product-driven change, which again, just external to the pricing committee, but not to the company, which is we're coming out with a new product. We got to figure out a way to price this thing. Otherwise, we're not going to make any money. Or new features that are being tacked on to your existing product, because you may or may not want to change your pricing scheme to sort of capture some of the surplus value that new feature creates for your customer base. And then the internal force is really like, whenever you decide that this is a good idea, there's a good opportunity to decide to chase for incremental revenue. Whatever the pricing committee thinks, you should just do it, right? You should just pursue that. So for market driven, typically the way this comes at you is a competitor who is sort of below you in the value chain comes after you with more premium features. And so that sort of value surplus that you had versus your competitor is reduced because now you no longer have quite as much of a feature advantage compared to them. And then the other way it tends to come at you with pricing is really a higher end competitor reducing their price and coming down market into your space and trying to squeeze you out. And so that's where they really get into a price war, and that reduces your price advantage that you had against that competitor so that you could say, yeah, I don't have that artificial intelligence feature, but I cost half as much. It really undermines your argument with prospects, and that's tough. So the other angle is product driven. So new features, really these are like Lego blocks. These are tools that you have to work with. Most SaaS companies have tiers, so it's not really a binary thing. You either buy me or you don't buy me. It's more so a good, better, best, which I definitely recommend. And part of the advantage of that is when you keep rolling out these new features, you can use them as what they call feature teeth, which is really like the reason why you'd want to trade up. I really want that. That artificial intelligence feature. So okay, I have to upgrade to the premium package. Those feature teeth are super helpful. And really, it's a way for you to realize revenue on your existing customer base without having to, without raising price effectively, right? Because if you put that new feature into your higher tier, then it's going to drive people to upgrade into that, and that's going to cause incremental revenue and produce an ROI on that software development work that the product team worked so hard on, right? It's a very helpful model and tool. And the new product, I show a dartboard here because really new products are very tough. They're very tough because you don't have nearly as much to work with because you haven't sort of had those reps with the market, those repetitions with the market to see whether your price is working or not. It's fresh, it's brand new, it's likely in a new market. So benchmarks can help you de-risk it. So who is already in the space and what do they price at? So again, you can actually go back to that previous model where you're saying, all right, my new product, it's a little worse than these guys, so I'm going to discount compared to them. It's a great way to sort of figure out where you should sit. That said, you also probably should do a third-party study to figure out what those extra features that you are missing or have that the other product doesn't is worth. What's it worth to them, and what's it worth to them in certain customer sets, because that will vary a lot. That feature that's worthless in this sector may be worth a ton in this sector. And so you may actually decide that you need to go with the premium price and just focus on these guys. So it's generally, in my perspective, worth it to do the competitor analysis and do the third-party analysis there. The obvious downside is, if you remember the three-legged stool, you won't be able to do the internal analysis because you've never sold this thing before. So you have no real data on it. So that's what makes this a little tougher. And the timing balance really comes down to the opportunity, right? What are the net benefits of the change? And then what's the cost of complexity and implementation of that change? And you should both look at that in a vacuum. Like, if we change this at any given point in the year, it's going to take this much time and cost this much OpEx. But then also look at it within the calendar and say, we should really not do it within this window, or we really should do it in this window. And you can look at it and say, like, if we pull this forward, do we do it now? It is going to be more costly because it's not great in terms of when we're going to utilize these resources. However, we're able to realize that revenue growth from the change sooner, realize the benefit of it, or get it in before a key sales window, whatever it may be. But you want to look at it in a vacuum and then look at it within the calendar at different points. And that's what will help you come up with what is the right timing balance for this project and when should you actually deploy it. So customer insights channels, there are a lot of them. The way that I look at it is that you should start with anecdotal, just mentions of, this thing annoys me, or what if we had this? So like, start with that anecdotal part and then build on it. So what I mean by that is you're just having conversations, basically. Have conversations with people, sit in on customer quarterly business reviews, and just overhear those things that are going to sort of spark your sort of investigation and deeper investigation of it. And then you're going to go down rabbit holes of unstructured analysis. These are all different pathways you can use. Not all of them will apply to your business, but they're all pretty useful and I've used them at various companies. And then you want to progressively move into structured analysis. So that's where you want to say, all right, I've discovered that this is a thing, but I need to understand it more fully. And I have specific questions about it. And the way that you'll answer those is surveys, third-party studies, and also expert interviews can be very useful, especially in that case where you're introducing a new product and getting into a new space. That's where you really don't have as much to lean on. And so an expert interview in that case is especially helpful. And then once you're at the structured analysis phase, you have a very good hypothesis of what it is that you might want to do. And then you're just doing validation. So guessing and checking, basically, if you remember from elementary school math. So you're going to talk to your customers at something like a customer advisory board, user forums, user testing, by actually putting the product in front of them, and talk to sales and CSMs. You should have already talked to them at the beginning, but that was more so to give you ideas of threads to pull on. Now you need to go back and validate and say, like, you said this is a problem. Do you think this will fix it? And then you should get that feedback and hopefully it's a good fit. So making the right change. So you've decided you're going to make a change. Now you need to figure out the right one. You've got a bunch of different pricing levers to pull. You can do flat fees versus volume-based fees, right? Does it cost more as you use it more, or no? Where do you want to set those caps? Do you bundle features, or are you rolling this thing out a la carte? Do you do tiering or not? Another thing to really think about is transparency. Do I want to put this on the website and just post it, or do I try to sell through channel sales, or am I personalizing pricing and trying to, do basically the used car salesman approach and sell everyone on a different unique price? If you are, then you certainly can't be transparent about your pricing. Keep in mind though, if you're not transparent, your pricing will get out. Non-disclosure agreements will not protect you realistically. It will get to your competitors. It'll get to other prospects. They'll find out what you're actually charging. So don't feel like you can just fully hide behind that. Change frequency. Again, you decide how frequently do I want to change? And that's not just based on the costs of making changes, but also potentially the benefits, and that it can provide a lever or a way to squeeze customers who are in the current pipeline of, hey, the pricing is actually going to change at the end of the quarter. So if you want this pricing, then you need to actually sign the deal now. Those types of things. What payment schedule, which can really depend on what your cash situation looks like and what your financials look like as a company, which is why, again, it's important to agree on what those principles are and what are you shooting for, to be able to get a better idea of, like, do I want to push for cash now and upfront payment terms, or does it not matter and I can spread those out and it can be more of a customer-friendly pricing structure? Service level agreements. So that's really like uptime, those types of things. How long is your contract? Contract terms. Contract minimums are another one that you may not expect, especially if you're starting on the low end and sort of moving up market. Typically you want to say, let's say we don't negotiate custom contract terms for all the special things that you want unless you're paying us $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, $100,000 a month, whatever it is that makes sense to your business. That's really where that's a useful structure. Pricing strategies, AKA the bag of tricks. I'm not going to go through these because it would take forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm posting them on my website. So kevinzentmeyer.com/pricing. So you can just go find them there. And again, the point is you shouldn't be going into the bag of tricks until you've decided that, you've set up your pricing committee, you've identified your opportunities, and you're really getting into figuring out what the solutions are that are right for the individual opportunities that you're digging into. So these really don't matter until you're at that stage, but I still want to give them to you guys because it feels wrong not to share that. So that's where I'm posting those. Real quick, before we wrap up, discounting. Discounting is dynamite. I don't mean that in a good way necessarily, but I also don't mean in a bad way. So dynamite in real life is a very useful tool, right? If you were a miner, it can be very fast and effective to sort of dig down, right? That's great. However, it is also an explosive. That's kind of scary. It's really dangerous. That's also true in pricing. It destroys value. And that if I give out a 60% discount to this customer, they're going to break their NDA. It's going to get out. Other people are going to find out that you often do discount. And then now you have to deal with discounting for every customer that comes in the door. So it does destroy value in terms of your ability to hold firm on pricing and your ability to sort of maintain the brand equity that your pricing does support if you're a premium product. This is sort of where the metaphor breaks down, because in pricing, but not in dynamite, friction helps. So what I mean by that is that friction sort of applies a bit of a barrier to sales. So they have to, let's say, ask their sales manager before they're able to apply a discount, or worse for them, they have to ask finance or ask you before they do that. And what that does is it just slows them down enough that they try a little bit harder on negotiation, and ultimately they end up exercising and executing at higher prices. Just as an example, if you say, hey, if you give a discount higher than 10%, you have to go talk to your sales manager. You'll see a ton of deals close at exactly a 10% discount. And if it's above 20%, you have to talk to finance. you'll see a whole bunch more deals close right at 20%. It's not a coincidence. It's because they're going right up until the friction hits, and then that's where they stop. And so that friction, again, is very helpful in trying to maintain those prices a bit higher, and it has a big impact on your profit and loss statement. So also cost plus floors. We talked about cost plus before in terms of a model. It's not useful in isolation as like a way you should price unless you work in the defense industry where they use that a lot. But it is very helpful in setting floors in that you can say, look, below this amount, we don't make money. So we should never price below this. Or below this amount, it's just not worth it for us to do a deal. So those floors are very helpful, and cost plus is really the best way to create those. The best way to create friction is using a deal desk, at least in my opinion. Here's a quick basic way to do it. You've got, in the bottom left quadrant, you've got small deal, small discount. At that point, you don't really care about discounting. It's fine. It's not really going to damage the business. No approvals needed. Sales rep, go do your thing. But if it's a large discount and a large deal, that you could be signing up the company for a very unprofitable deal that weighs it down. And so that's where you need a lot more scrutiny. And so that's where you might want sales management and finance weighing in. And then for those sort of deals in between, sales management can handle within sales' own ranks. So the keys to a deal desk are establishing guardrails up front. So saying, hey, here's how we do analysis and what we might approve and why. And then you've got to create a workflow. So as a sales rep, do I email finance? Do I email I recommend this, but do I email dealdesk@mycompany.com and then it gets routed to the correct person? That's what I would recommend. Or better yet, set up automated workflows within Salesforce where it routes to the correct approvers based on the specifics of the deal. So that no one actually has to do anything. It passively gets managed and actively pushed to wherever it needs to go so that person can handle it. And then you really need a 24-hour SLA, because if this slows down sales, they will complain and they will get their way because you're getting in the way of getting deals done. And so if you've got to keep that SLA short so that as a sales rep, I'm in a deal cycle, I'm producing a price, and I'm trying to close this deal, that this isn't the barrier that stops that deal from happening. So to recap, we talked about stakeholder alignment, which again, the most important thing. So start there, focus there. How to make pricing changes, customer insight channels, which is really the basis on which that you're going to make all of your moves in pricing, how it accelerates revenue, when to make pricing changes and where to strike that balance, making the right change, which again, do your research once you've realized what you want to impact, and then discounting. So again, if you want more content, you want that bag of tricks, then you can go find them at my website. Thank you again for joining my talk. Kevin Zentmeyer at Ibotta. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the rest of the conference.